Live from Austin, Texas, this is the Plutopia News Network. Our guest this time, Brett Hurt, CEO at Data.World. Maggie and Susie couldn't join us tonight, so you're left with Scoop Sweeney, that's me, and our designated driver for this happy hour, John Lubkowski.
Am I the designated driver?
Sure.
Man, I don't even know that I have a license for this.
A license to communicate.
I do have a poetic license. Well, we are again gathering on Tuesday night for Plutopia Live, and our guest tonight is Brett Hurt, an Austin entrepreneur, co-founder and CEO of Data.World. Brett was also founder and CEO of Core Metrics and Bazaarvoice. So he has a rich history as an entrepreneur, a history of success. And I will also say that Brett is a very smart guy with a heart of gold.
Thanks very much, my friend.
And we're happy to have you here. And I know you've been actively commenting on the pandemic via Facebook. So that's one thing we'll probably talk about here. It may be hard to ignore politics, but I think for the most part, we're going to talk about data and we're going to talk about entrepreneurial endeavor. And I think the first thing to talk about is Data.World. How did you find your way to that project, Data.World?
Yeah, so Data.World actually was not my business idea. It was my co-founder's idea, Brian Jacob. Brian was employee number 10 at HomeAway.com, which got bought by Expedia, as everybody knows, here in Austin. That was one of the largest exits in Austin history and really put us on the map for kind of .com B2C, once again. It's a $3.9 billion exit. And one of the things that Brian was struggling with at HomeAway was the connectivity between all the data sets and all the data platforms that they had kind of cobbled together through acquisition. HomeAway did 37 acquisitions in their history, and Brian was leading that team on the back end. And the way that Brian entered the picture is that I became involved in the Henry Crown Fellowship. I was named as a fellow at the Aspen Institute. And that was a real soulful journey where, I had to be very introspective about, was this a time in my life where I should be doing more for society, where I should really step up and do something bigger than I've done before? And so I was in the hunt for a business that would be a much bigger kind of impact to the world than Bazaarvoice or Core Metrics before. And I decided to grab a couple of my friends that I worked with at Bazaarvoice prior. One of them I had gone to grad school with as well, to the Wharton School, and we've been, best friends for a long, long time, Matt Lessig. And John Loynes was the best head of engineering we had in Bazaarvoice's history. And so I said, hey, would you like to brainstorm with me? And we started to brainstorm about a lot of topics on the weekend, and ultimately started talking about the future of data and why is it so siloed, and why hasn't the data promise really lived up to its original hype? And that's where John said, my friend Brian, we described Brian, who I initially started working with at Trilogy, has this business idea, but it's kind of impossibly hard to imagine. And it would require a tremendous amount of funding to get it off the ground. But maybe that's something that we could do. And we invited Brian into the brainstorms, and that was it. That was the business. Now, one thing that you should know about my background is, like, why did that particular idea appeal to me? And I've been on a journey to helping companies become more data driven ever since I was 26 years old. I really awoken to the power of data when I was 25, and I launched an e-commerce site built on an e-commerce platform that I had built. I've been programming since I was 7 years old, so I had that ability to kind of build and test and iterate and see what works. And I got really fascinated by the fact that I could analyze everybody's behavior on the site if only I added different elements to capture the data of what they were doing. And so instead of trying to cobble together history through log files, which didn't even occur to me, frankly, because those were meant for technical debugging, I decided to just do direct writes to a special data relational database that was set up specifically to understand how customers were engaging with my e-commerce site. And that turned out to be a very novel innovation. I didn't realize it was novel until I went to go talk with friends, and they said, oh yeah, the way we do this, we try to cobble together log files. I was like, well, why would you use that? Those are based on, you know, debugging. Like, that's the only reason you have a log file. And they were like, well, that's how web trends and these other solutions are set up. And I thought, well, that makes no sense at all for marketing use, and that the error rate was really high. And these solutions that they were trying to cobble together took anywhere from 9 to 18 months to ultimately build and integrate. And that was kind of the eureka moment that made me think, wow, I could create a whole business around this. And that started Coremetrics, and then Coremetrics helped Walmart and so many big retailers in terms of becoming much more data-driven, really understanding their online business, even more so in a way than their offline business, understanding exactly how their ads were performing, exactly how people were navigating, exactly what promotions were performing. And every time we had a Coremetrics client summit, we would have customers on stage raving about how they've literally transformed their business, primarily online, around really understanding exactly what customers were doing. And it was just awesome. And that became a big company. And that continued with Bazaarvoice, which really popularized the notion of customer reviews all over the web. There were only 3 retailers in the entire United States who had customer reviews when we started that company in 2005. I started that with Brent Barden, who's a very close friend, who's my co-founder and worked with me at Coremetrics. And Bazaarvoice then provided this new data layer of what people actually thought about your products in an unbiased way. It wasn't like a survey, it was this modality of them thinking about talking to each other and engaging in word of mouth. And the reason we named it Bazaarvoice is it meant the voice of the marketplace, and it was a shout out to Chapter 4 of the Clue Train Manifesto, which is available for free online. And Chapter 4, the title of that chapter is Markets or Conversations. It's a phenomenal read. That's the single best chapter of any book I've ever read on marketing. And that was what we named the business after. We named it after the voice of the marketplace. And we wanted to symbolize that this voice had been ancient and old and had really been the most important thing that we would all tune into, much more so than advertising. And so we launched that company. It became a great success. And again, at the Bazaarvoice Customer Summit, you would see customers on stage like LL Bean and Walmart and a bunch of others talking about how this voice of the customer was just like this epiphany and led to them coming out with new products and completely changing the way they partner with suppliers. And, it was phenomenal for attracting customers and converting customers because it gave people that ability to touch and feel in an online medium through other people's experiences. And we just hit the market at the exactly right time. I mean, we had a massive negative event come along in the Great Recession, but we even blew past our goals even during the Great Recession because it worked. It generated revenue. It was the holy grail for driving conversion on an e-commerce site. And I think Amazon figured that out before Bazaarvoice did, and that's why Jeff Bezos was so tight-lipped at any e-commerce conference and never told anybody. There was literally nothing about how well it worked. But because we had that backdrop of Coremetrics, we knew exactly how well it worked. We knew exactly how much it drove conversion, and it drove conversion more than anything else we had measured in the history of Coremetrics, which is kind of incredible. And it
Amazon
was
didn't
just
really have
fascinating to be.
Amazon didn't really have conversations per se. Am I correct? It's more like just sort of reviews as statements.
Well, actually, no. They launched customer reviews, which were authentic, generated by the customer, about 5 years after their inception. So they were really ahead of the curve. You know, because we're talking 2005 when we launched Bazaarvoice, and there were only 3 retailers, including Amazon, that had customer reviews on their site in the United States.
But when you say customer reviews, though, are we talking about customer feedback merely, or are we talking about customers in back and forth conversation about the product?
So we're talking about 5-star, 4-star reviews on
just those
Amazon
reviews,
site,
yeah,
where people are, you know, expressing their opinion. And later on, of course, Amazon built on that functionality and allowed threaded discussions around it and stuff like that. But it was the authentic voice of the customer. I mean, it was the real deal. People could write a very negative review. Jeff Bezos was called out many times by publishers of books saying, "You're going to kill our business. Nobody's going to buy the books if they rate them negatively." All the things that we faced at Bazaarvoice, people were terrified of negative reviews.
So were you able to derive data other than just the ratings? I mean, were you able to do like sentiment analysis on?
Oh yeah. We took it beyond the beyond at Bazaarvoice in terms of like, how do you maximize that? Like, it was a phenomenal analytical resource. We found out that 4-star reviews were often the most valuable to analyze, because people would literally tell each other, "I would have rated this product 5-star if only Samsung had made it with this and that feature." And that became a direct pipe from Walmart to Samsung. And we created all these direct pipes. And when we took Bazaarvoice public, the thing that people cared about the most when we're on the IPO roadshow in terms of prospective investors is the network effect between the brands like P&G and 3M and Johnson & Johnson and all the brands they have, and the retailers like Walmart and Walgreens and others that are customers of Bazaarvoice, and how that network effect really created this whole collaboration around content and products, and really made the retail ecosystem work, which really was a shout out to how retail had always worked. It was always a grand collaboration between retailers and brands.
So part of what you were doing was gathering intelligence about that was used for product improvement. Is that
product
correct?
Improvement, you would find out that a product that has a high return rate, you would know exactly why. Walmart got to the point where if they got a certain amount of negative reviews on products, they would literally ship the product, not just back from Walmart.com's inventory, but from all the Walmart stores. And they would say to the brand, they would say, "Look, we're not going to deal with all the returns." And before Bazaarvoice, if you think about it, like, returns were always a reflection of what had happened, not what was happening at the moment. They're a reflection of looking in the rearview mirror saying, "Wow, we really missed the mark. We have a product that's getting a ton of returns because it was way too hard to install, or it just had really bad documentation, or it broke easily, or whatever it was."
Or maybe you didn't even know why, because you weren't getting any feedback.
They didn't know at all, and most of the time, and then there was all that uncomfortableness between the person accepting the return and the customer trying to exchange it, and a lot of times that wasn't a very good dialogue, where the person accepting the return's like, "Well, wait, let me really understand. Like, why are you returning this? Let me mark this down so that Samsung will know." That didn't happen hardly at all, and so it became an incredibly valuable analytical source. And the thing that turned me on the most about Bazaarvoice that relates to Data.World is that, it was like this epiphany for people. And so I've seen that data can be a very liberating force, and Data.World is kind of the manifestation of my career since literally I was 25 years old.
One One
Can
of
we
the
pedal
things
backwards just a little bit? The term data-driven is used a lot, and I think that people who are not technical, they'll hear it and it might have some meaning for them, but they don't really get much depth with it.
Yeah.
Could you say a little bit about what it means to be data-driven?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'm actually writing an article on this right now because I think our industry has done a real disservice to companies for decades. It's made data look like this very technical thing that, frankly, people have said, like, just give it to the IT people because I don't know what the hell they're talking about. And the problem with that is that data, to be data-driven, really means to be knowledge-driven. And if you think about it, if you're a business, any business, you have to understand your customers and what they're doing. You have to understand your employees. You have to understand your suppliers. You have to understand, basically, the more knowledge you have about your business, the better you're going to be at being highly effective in your business, the more you're going to survive and thrive. And the more ignorant you are about your business, the more likely it is you're going to go out of business. And so now we find ourselves in this time of COVID-19, and to be data-driven, kind of the nirvana is that you are a highly operationally efficient company. You're able to act on opportunities very quickly. You're able to serve both your customers and your employees with breakneck speed. It is the way that modern businesses are formed. Like, let's take a business like Airbnb. Airbnb's 6th employee in their history was a data scientist. They built their whole business around understanding data and being able to very quickly adapt to changes in their marketplace. And it's part of the reason they're going to survive and thrive right now. They're actually doing incredibly well given everything going on in the world. And over 50% of Airbnb's employees have essentially a data catalog at their fingertips every day, and they use it every day. And if you compare that to a traditional business, like a traditional Fortune 500 business, they're lucky if 1% of their employees have access to really understanding that business in terms of its knowledge about its customers, suppliers, and everything else. They don't have the notion of something like a data catalog. Many of them don't even have a chief data officer. And so they just have a huge knowledge deficit. And in a time like COVID-19, where the facts on the ground are changing faster than they have since the Great Recession, they're in big trouble without that. And so to be data-driven is to really be excellent in business. I mean, we need to get the IT terms out of the equation and the fear about the terms and the people thinking like, it's almost like this primal fear for people that, you know, a lot of people weren't good at math growing up. And so they have this primal fear of anything that's like, seems like complex mathematics.
Or abstract.
What's that?
Abstract, yeah. Some people can't deal with abstraction.
Right, and so it's just easier to give it to the brainiacs. But the reality is that data is literally the lifeblood of businesses because it is your knowledge. It is your awareness. And you know, look, we spend a lifetime as individuals trying to even understand ourselves. Like, what is our core truth in life? You know, one of the best books I've ever read is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. An amazing read, Holocaust survivor, survived 4 concentration camps, ultimately concludes that the reason that most of the people he knew directly survived is because they had a very clear meaning and purpose. Now, clearly you could get shot in the head or, you know, sent to a gas chamber, et cetera. But he meant the people that were able to endure the starvation. They were able to endure the pain, that were lucky enough not to get shot in the head versus the people that just take their own life because it was so horrific. They had a very clear calling. They had a lot of unfinished business and they had found their meaning. And he posed in the book that many people kind of had resorted to medicating that away. And we've actually seen that with the opioid crisis in this country, which is really, quite sad. That people try to medicate away this search for meaning, and we spend so much time trying to understand like the best diets and the best exercise. Well, why are we doing that? We're trying to do that to improve ourselves. Well, we are collecting data and doing that, and companies are no different. And so we've created what I think is an extremely valuable tool. And since COVID-19 has occurred, on 2 dimensions, we've just been growing, like crazy. And there's 2 dimensions of our business. There's one dimension, which is completely free for everybody in the world. And that's a free public data catalog with all the public data sets you could imagine, from COVID-19 to climate change, to poverty, to nutrition. It's grown as fast as GitHub grew. That's all available to everybody. And if you sign up and you get an account, that's free. And then if you collaborate with people in public, that's free because you're contributing to a public body of knowledge. And we're a proud B corporation. We've actually been named in the top 10% of all B corporations in the world for the last 3 years. And then there's this private side of the business, which is how we make our revenue, which is used by a number of really large Fortune 500 companies. And they use us in private to really get their internal data cataloged and be able to collaborate on that across various teams. And I mean, we've seen, a number of our customers during this time of COVID-19, where everybody's forced to be kind of sheltered in place, just sign, their user growth inside their company has just been astronomical. And it's because their facts are changing so fast, their customers' facts are changing so fast, and so they have to adapt to be more data-driven than they were before. And that's something that ultimately, we're able to help with. So it's neat that I get to kind of tie the thematic of my career up in one company that's my most ambitious and exciting one to date.
Brett, the data acquisition and data analysis is widespread in almost every part of the economy. Healthcare, law enforcement, government, all sorts of areas have concentrated on data acquisition, data analysis, and they've had positive outcomes. But have you seen any of these kind of acquisition and analysis efforts that you find worrisome or dangerous?
I don't know if I would say worrisome or dangerous. I mean, I definitely, there are things that happen in kind of closed data networks that I'm very worried about. Like I'm very worried about Russian operatives, trolling in our elections, but that is a closed data network. That is not something that's open to the public. So it's really up to Facebook to protect us all there. And, they're going to argue, it seems for a long time, that it's just too hard to do so because there's just too much data to look at. And I actually refuse to believe that. I think that actually is a technical problem that can be solved. But, I understand that they're going to sing about the free speech thing all the way. On the public side, all of data.gov is on Data.World, all of data.gov.uk. There's a lot of really valuable public data out there. And I haven't seen anything on the public side that really concerns me. And of course, there have been data breaches like of Experian and different things like that, which can be harmful to, bad actors. But that wasn't intentionally made public. So the stuff that I've seen that's been deliberately made public, I'm sure that there's some of it that is just made up or whatever else. But one thing that's been really cool to see with Data.World is we put a brand out there of very positive intentionality and really made it clear that those are kind of the rules of the community and everything else. And as a result, we've seen a lot of positive intentionality. Like every day you can get a high just by seeing all of the cool things people are collaborating on at Data.World, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, you know, one of the things going on right now that's so tragic is you know, obviously the death of George Floyd, and really the murder of George Floyd, and how that's causing, you know, these peaceful protests, which are great, but unfortunately combined with some people that are rioting and looting, which that part's not great. But I definitely understand the rage. I definitely understand the anger. But you know, we've put out, or we've collaborated with people that have put out, you know, kind of definitive data sets on police use of force. I mean, there's something called the Force Report that won all types of journalism awards last year, and all that data is available on Data.World. They collaborated with us from the beginning of that and published it on Data.World, and I think that's healthy. I mean, I believe in the old saying that sunlight is the best disinfectant. That can cause, you know, some really positive change.
You find that data journalists are making use of Data.World?
A ton of data journalists. Actually, one of our customers is the Associated Press. They're actually our longest time customer. And the Associated Press uses us to collaborate on COVID-19 data and many other newsworthy data bits with their customers. These are people like the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN. As a result, a lot of the stories that you're reading on COVID-19 that are very data-driven stories are actually flowing through Data.World. You just didn't know maybe that we existed. And that work has been so important for the Associated Press and raising the level of data journalism worldwide, that they won something called the Chairman's Award last year, which is the highest award you can win at the Associated Press. It's the team that selected Data.World, and they won it because, you know, we're just a tool in the equation. They won it because of the way they use the tool to really lift data journalism, and there are many, many examples of that. And that award's so prestigious that many years it's not even given out. So that team's pretty excited, to say the least, that they won it. And you know, that's when we do eventually have a Data.World summit, as we've had Bazaarvoice and Core Metrics summits before. One of the first people that I've tapped to speak would be Ken Romano of the Associated Press. And one of the things that we did is we shifted to this shelter-in-place mode. Is we came into this, I've got to tell you, John, we came into this, like, I came into this really scared about our business. And the reason I was scared about our business is that we had, you know, our quarter runs February through April. So we just finished our Q1 of this new fiscal year, and we just beaten our fiscal year goal for the whole year last year. And so we had set our budgets and our goals as a board of directors on February 19th. And part of that was predicated on the biggest event of our year in March at the Gartner Data Analytics Summit. It was our single most important event that we exhibited at last year, and I spoke alongside 3 of our customers last year. And we had it teed up, you know, I was going to speak alongside 3 of our customers again, and we were putting a ton of money into it. And then boom, COVID hit. Events pushed out until the fall. By the way, that event just canceled for good this year. And we had to scramble, and on the day that we were going to be in person for that event, we instead did the largest event virtually in our company's history, and then did a ton of other virtual events, and actually beat our original sales goal pre-COVID-19, beat our original lead gen goal pre-COVID-19, which would have been heavily predicated, because we're a B2B company, right? That's heavily predicated on conferences and the like, and beat our original marketing goals, which really floored me. I mean, it really just made me incredibly proud of the team to rally like that during such a incredible time. I mean, I literally broke down in tears as the quarter closed. I had this emotional reaction. I just sat like right where I am at now, crying, because I just, it was surreal. Like I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. I've been through 9/11. I've been through the dot-com bust. I've been through the Great Recession. And all three of those things, I was in a CEO role, like trying to stay positive, motivate a team. But I haven't seen anything as difficult as COVID-19. I mean, this is really, really bad.
Well, speaking of COVID-19 data, one thing that, I mean, for one thing, people are so much more aware of the importance of data now if they've been focusing on the COVID-19 data, which has been giving us some idea of the spread of the disease.
Mm-hmm.
But there's been shortcomings, for one thing, because we don't really know how many actual cases there are. And right. The death rate is hard to calculate, for instance, because we don't really have the denominator.
Right.
We don't really know the actual number of cases because so many cases could be unreported. But one of the things I've noticed is that there have been a lot of instances where data was misinterpreted or misused. Have you seen that? In your...
Yeah, I mean, there's the original Imperial College model, which, in hindsight was off, but, these models are highly extrapolated based on the inputs they have. And you've heard the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. So if you don't, let's take our country, for example, if you don't have the testing infrastructure set up from the beginning, then you're going to be hamstrung all the way through because you don't have an idea of how many people have it, how to isolate them. You're not taking as heavy of a handed approach as the Chinese government did in Wuhan. And what it seems like we're finding out now is that there are many more people that were asymptomatic. Yay, that's good. The bad part is that we actually do have over 100,000 deaths. And there are a lot of people that got this that didn't die, who have really damaged their lungs and had some serious, maybe long-term damage that we'll find out about decades from now. And so, we have to keep that in mind in any of these statistics. But yeah, we have a major input problem throughout the world on COVID-19 in terms of, and the U.S. is now catching up in tests. I mean, our president likes to say we're #1 in tests. The reality is that we're number 12 in tests. If you look at the test, per million people. So we've got, we've still got a long way to go. And then we've got the backdrop of the fact that Americans are highly impatient and we have very short-term memories. And now people are like, well, it's time to get back to business, even though really nothing has changed other than the fact that we know that the death rate is lower percentage-wise because of how many people are asymptomatic, but yet it is a horribly worse thing to get than the flu. And we know that it's killed more people than the flu already. So
we're not completely clear
it's
why the people who have fatal cases or really bad cases have them. So it's hard to know. I think they kind of know more about that now, and they're starting to come up with some treatment methodologies that can be more useful and more successful. But one thing that that I noticed, and I hadn't really thought about this before in my own mind, I kind of had I sort of understood that a model, a data model is kind of like a scenario, right?
Mm-hmm.
And futurists don't predict the future, but they come up with scenarios and they look at different scenarios.
That's right.
And consider what the likely futures are. Right. And models are like that. You can come up with a model and you can say, well, this is maybe a worst case model. So those models that we were seeing, some of them were worst case, some of them were less worst case. And people just in general who didn't really understand data modeling were seeing those models as assuming that they were meant to be predictive, but that's not really what they're for, right? It's not a prediction, but it's a more of a guideline or a points in a direction.
Yeah, but it was a point in time where it was the best that we had, and I think the way that China reacted, and then the situation on the ground in Italy, where literally it was so stacked up in some places in Italy that they didn't even have time to bury the dead, put them in, freezers, like really set the backdrop for a very extreme, reaction to these models. And, we'll know years from now whether or not that was the right reaction. There's no doubt that the actions we've taken have saved lives. And this is not something that I personally want to get. I'm 48 years old. I'm not in a high risk age group, but I'm not going out there. I'm not, mixing it up, trying to, say, hey, life's just back to normal. Because I have close friends that have gotten this. I haven't had a friend get it yet and die, but I've had very close friends get it and need to be hospitalized. And they said it was the worst sickness they've ever had. So it's not something that I think we should be rushing out there and just saying, hey, life's just back to normal. And unfortunately, that is a very American thing. Now, the other backdrop here that you have to keep in mind from this is just a fun data fact for you. In the last 4 months, or the first 4 months of 2020, the number in the top 10 movies on iTunes was Contagion. Okay, in Contagion, 20 to 25% of people die. This is definitely not that. But what I really worry about is that the way that we've reacted here, and the assault that we've had on science and just facts. And I'm an optimist overall. It really makes me worried about what if it actually was a 5% death rate. Like, what if it actually had been? This COVID-19 is not today, assuming it doesn't mutate and stuff like that. But what if it had been? And how are we actually going to deal with climate change? Like, there's companies like Data.World that can show you the truth, but then we have to actually be willing to engage in policy making based on the truth, not based on what our desires are. And I very much am empathetic and understand the desire to get back to business as usual, given the 40 million jobs lost. Hopefully those are temporary, but we'll know whether or not they're temporary on whether or not we get back to work. And so, there's all these kind of commingled factors in terms of people saying, well, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to go out there and take my risk, because of this job loss, and that's also causing very real pain. But
well,
how are we actually going to act we're probably in our lifetimes going to have a pandemic where the death rate is actually like 10%.
Well, there's a couple of things going on there. I mean, I can't argue with somebody like, Joel Trammell, for instance, who was arguing forcefully that we can't just throw the economy out the window. We really have to get back to work.
Right.
And, my initial response was, well, it's too soon. But eventually I was saying, well, maybe we have to do it, but we have to be smart about how we do it. And we have to continue to socially distance, wear masks, whatever.
Yes.
And a lot of people are on board with that.
Yep. I agree.
The problem I have, and I'm sure you would agree with me, is that there are people who are completely rejecting social distancing, wearing masks, or any of that as some kind of like communist plot, or in this case, liberal plot. the liberals want us to do all this stuff. The Democrats want us to do all this stuff. And they're just doing it to try to bring Trump down. And I'm not going to wear a mask. And some people are actually being pretty ugly about that and are attacking people who are wearing masks.
But now we're into the realm of fantasy. So, I mean, we're beyond the realm of data. Like, you know, there is data and you can show people the facts. And then there's fantasy and kind of this alternate reality that everybody would like to believe because it's convenient for them, or they feel this very strong desire of like, my business is melting down and I'm scared and I just can't face the truth. It was like, you know, and, you know, Al Gore had that, you know, very appropriately titled movie. It's a very inconvenient truth. Why would people want to believe that? But it is the facts. And yeah, I mean, look, I'm all for doing everything safely, like wearing masks, you know, making sure that you socially distance. I think that that's very important. But that's not the way. I mean, a lot of people are being mass shamed right now. There's a lot of people that are shaming businesses that are requiring masks. That is just absolute lunacy and fantasy. Like, that's not based on, I can't show you any data that says like, those aren't even data-driven people. They're not basing that on data. They're just basing that on what they wish to be true. And that's the perpetual argument we're going to have as a human species. I mean, there's the people that are math-oriented, and there's the people that are gut-feel-oriented. And, you know, there's books like Malcolm Gladwell's Blink, and I'm a big Malcolm Gladwell fan overall. And then there's, you know, books like the one I have right here. I didn't put this here as a prop, but, you know, Figuring, right, by Maria Popova. So there's, you know, this is the type of book read by someone who cares about data. Blink is the type of book who, you know, people just want to believe like, hey, I feel it in my bones. And, you know, there's some truth to what Malcolm Gladwell says in that book, and I get it, but it's mostly based on storytelling ability, and we're very good at telling ourselves stories.
I wouldn't have connected Maria Popova with data. How is Figuring a book for people who care about data?
Oh, it's phenomenal. I mean, there's tons of charts and graphs in here that describe all types of amazing data trends. Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, this is a book, you know, which really gets you. It's kind of like a Tufte type of read. Really gets you to think a lot about visualizing data and everything else in a beautiful way.
A lot of the people in the denial space cite data, or they claim they have data. The president claims he has data, statistics to prove whatever it is he's trying to prove, but never seems to actually come up with much of that. That there are a lot of people like to massage the data to make their point. My favorite example of that is that notorious bar chart that someone created in tracking in infections. It was numerically aligned rather than chronologically aligned,
right?
And just insane stuff. But have you seen a lot more of that sort of thing? Not just in the COVID space, but just in business in general, of people massaging the data to prove a sketchy point.
I think that happens. I haven't seen that in business as much as I've seen that in politics. I mean, that is a very real situation where politicians will massage things to try to get a policy passed that they think their constituents want. But business people, that's like, I mean, that's suicidal if you're in business, because you have to base your business based on real facts. Like, you can't make up your revenue. You can't make up, if you do, like in your public company, you go to jail. But, you know, if you're a private company, you know, you're just, if you have any investors at all, you're just absolutely, you know, setting yourself up for a world of pain. Plus you're essentially lying to yourself and to all of your people. So I've seen it more used for political means. And that's part of the reason we developed Data.World, frankly, is we thought, look, the more eyes on something, the better. If there's a lot of people that are looking and making fun of a chart because it's so bombastically wrong, then at least you know there's a place you can turn to go dive into the data itself and see the truth for yourself.
I'm impressed by the fact that you have Associated Press gathering or using your data gathering, and that's impressive in a news business. But you know, I'm guessing there's one network that probably won't be calling you for help on their data, and I think I won't say any names.
Yeah,
but,
that's Foxy. Love you.
But
yeah. Well,
you know, they seem to have their own independent data source.
yeah, I mean, you know, there will, again, this fear of mathematics is going to play out time and time again, where you show someone a chart that is clearly erroneous, that any, you know, credible mathematician or data scientist would look at and say, this is manipulated to appear this way to you. But you know, those people are going to believe what they want to believe, and you know, there's great power in showing someone a chart that doesn't understand mathematics, and people saying, well, that must be the truth, and that's a shame. And so, you know, how are we countering that at Data.World? We're just one of many forces out there. You know, one way we're countering that is we work with hundreds of universities and schools, and have made it very easy to learn basic data science. You know, a lot of universities use our free offering to embed in their classes, and we provide them all types of different assignments and the like. We also came out with the manifesto for data practices, where we worked with some of the most famous data scientists in the world and really created a movement kind of in the vein of the Agile Manifesto, but for data. And that has more signatories now than the Agile Manifesto had in its first couple of years. And you can find it at datapractices.org. Anybody can sign up for that in a very kind of clue-trained manifesto way. It's not just a manifesto or way to do business. It also takes you through a series of courses to say, here's how you actually put it in practice in your company. So, you know, we'll continue to put positive forces out there like that. But yeah, there are some bad actors out there, and they tend to be political operatives of sorts.
Well, it seems like you're in a pretty good position to be at the forefront of you might call it a movement to depoliticize data.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the politicization of data and of our thinking that has contradicted the facts of, say, the facts of COVID, the facts of climate change.
Yeah.
The facts and the truth have been sidelined, I guess is a nice way to put it, in service to political agendas. And I find myself in conversations with people where pretty much anything that I say, I may make a factual or a fairly, I think, objective statement, mm-hmm. and they interpret it in a way that is political. So for some people, all their thinking has become political.
Right.
And I think that's one of the greatest evils of our contemporary culture, is that it has become so politicized that we can't think straight anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, all I can do about that is try to create some kind of counterbalancing force in the world as an entrepreneur. And that we had very real conversations about that at the beginning of Data.World. This was before, you know, Trump was even a thing. We didn't think he would get elected or anything like that. But, there's always counterbalancing forces that come along, and our counterbalancing force for the world is we're here for people that want to believe in facts and want to analyze the facts to make sure that they're right, because mistakes are made. There was one fact that came out a couple of years ago on our platform where an enterprising data journalist had uploaded how diverse the Fortune 500 were and made a mistake in the data table. And someone said, hey, Microsoft can't be 97% male. And she said, you're right, I made a typo error and corrected it. Well, everybody saw that, but it's now the canonical example of mistakes will be made. But again, if you have more eyes on something, then it ferrets out mistakes much, much more quickly than if you just have like some, nameless, kind of political operative on Fox News showing some chart that is just frankly a bunch of bullshit, and people want to believe it, and they don't have any means to everybody's got the means, but they haven't exercised the means to say, well, is that really true? I mean, let me see the data behind that. Let me see how you actually put that together. I want to live in that world.
One area of data that's fairly controversial is medical data. Mm-hmm. Medical records. I spent a long career in medical IT in the area, and that was always, if you were going to get fired, that's a place you would probably be fired, is if you disclose someone's medical records to the wrong person or company, if it was the end of your career. And I don't know if it's really changed all that much. Have you encountered much
we work with
your service with medical?
We do. We work with a number of people in medical. We are HIPAA compliant and SOC 2 compliant, which matters for that space a lot. And there's all different types of laws they have to comply with, and financial services people have to comply with as well, which are also a segment of customers that we have. And we're able to help there a lot. But yeah, I mean, we built into our system is navigating all of that in a way where you don't make the mistakes.
Yeah, HIPAA and Sarbanes-Oxley were big burdens we had to cope with, just trying to make sure we didn't let the wrong people into the system. And
I mean, this is the huge advantage of the software as a service model. I mean, prior to Core Metrics, people primarily rolled their own when it came to building web analytics, and some people did it great, but most people did it really, really bad. The same thing is true in this space, that some people like Airbnb, we probably will not sell Airbnb our solution. They've kind of done it right from the very beginning, but they've raised billions of dollars and have been really deliberate about being data driven and building a data driven infrastructure so that they can be a more effective business from the beginning of their company. But most people that we've encountered, I'm talking like 98%, haven't been that deliberate, and part of it has been just they've gotten stuck in a proprietary vendor ecosystem, which was sold to them as some panacea. And that's where our industry has done a big disservice. I mean, part of our design principle with Data.World going in is that we'll integrate with everything. And actually 2/3 of our integrations are built by the community. Our most recent example of a big integration is with Snowflake, which is actually the fastest growing software company in the past 3 years. They're the data warehouse in the cloud and just absolutely growing by leaps and bounds. They just got valued at $12 billion, and they were going to do an IPO this year, but that's now maybe punted until next year. And it's just been astronomical, kind of growth. And so if you look at all these integrations and kind of the approach we've taken and the open APIs we've had from the beginning, we just said, look, we want to be Switzerland and we want to work with everything. And the advantage of that when we go into a company is that unfortunately, because all those proprietary stacks, they've got a bit of everything now. And it's all disconnected, and it just creates a massive data silo problem. And now their people are also siloed, which doesn't help the situation at all. So, companies have their work cut out for them to become data driven, and we think we have a really unique approach there. And the beautiful thing about our business model is that as we build all this technology for companies to use in private, so that they get a competitive edge, the entire world benefits, because that code gets used by our open data community on anything that they want to work on that they're passionate about. I mean, I just got tagged in a post, last week from a gentleman from India that I've never met, who's using Data.World really to compile and put together all the COVID-19 data about how this is breaking down in India for policymaking, and that feels really good to be an enabler in that way.
Hey, Brett, we're down to just the last 3 or 4 minutes. And I was just wondering we know we're in kind of a bad way right now, economically in the U.S. Some say on the verge of depression, certainly in a recession. Do you have advice as a seasoned entrepreneur, do you have advice for other entrepreneurs who are trying to get a business up and running for this time,
Well, so I mean, it depends on type of business, but I really focus on digital age businesses, and we also are investors in quite a few, as you know. We're investors in 82 startups now and 25 VC funds. And with digital age businesses, many of them are having the best times of their lives. They're really thriving. And the reason is that the world has been kind of in a forced shutdown to prioritize COVID-19 life save in the wake of this mass amount of fear and what we saw happening in China and Italy. And the digital age businesses are digital. They're not tied to a physical location, and they're becoming more needed than ever during this time. So there's a tale of two economies going on. There's the kind of depression economy going on for some of the businesses that have really been hurt by the shutdown as we prioritize lives. And then there's the businesses that are having the best performance of their life. Zoom just, we're doing this on Zoom. Zoom just reported right before we got on this that they beat their expectations to the point where it was just out of the park. It wasn't like they slightly beat, they massively, massively beat. Data.World's beating our goals. This has been a huge, huge boon to Amazon, a huge boon to Facebook, frankly, the platform we're broadcasting on right now. So if you're not thinking about the trends towards digital, and if your business as an entrepreneur is not digitally enabled, then you're not basically planning for the future. I mean, this could be the best time for your business as an entrepreneur. The more you're tied to physical space, it could be the worst time for your business. But COVID-19 is going to pass. There are many heroes that are going to be made during this time. We are going to develop a vaccine. We are going to come out with the Tamiflu type drugs. I mean, just to end on an optimistic note, we're going to learn how to live with this safely. It's going to happen because there are literally billions of dollars to be made by people that come up with those solutions, and they'll be heralded on every business magazine cover as the heroes of this generation. And governments are incentivizing that. All types of private businesses are incentivizing that. Foundations, Bill Gates is incentivizing that. So there's a massive amount of energy going towards that, and we will get out of this mode. But the ambassador from Israel to the US, Ron Dermer. I was on a conference call with him, and he said it really, really well, where he said, it's kind of like we were straddling between the old world businesses and with one leg and the digital age businesses with the other. And COVID-19 just massively accelerated us to the more of the digital age businesses. And that's exactly what's happened. I mean, one thing I will say for people that are thinking about investment advice is I'm really worried that the Dow right now is at a little bit over 25,000. I think it's 25,600 today, and it hit a low of 19,000. I don't think that that's sustainable. I think we're going to trade at best in some range, for a long period of time, as recovery will take a long time. So, I think that's just a symbol of short-termism and the fact that people are basically assuming the best, assuming that, we develop the vaccine super quick, assuming that we develop the Tamiflu drug super quick, assuming that these businesses recover super quick, assuming that the 40 million jobs lost are really temporary, and that maybe the actual number is like 10 million, which is still a horrific number. So I'm optimistic that we're gonna solve this problem with COVID-19, but I think it's going to take a long time, and I wouldn't be buying into the market right now, personally.
Well, thanks,
Not at
Brett.
these levels.
This has been a great conversation tonight. We really appreciate you joining us.
You bet. Thank you.
Come visit us
Okay.
again.
Yeah, thank you.
You can stay in touch with Plutopia at plutopia.io. On Facebook, look for @Plutopia News. On Twitter, it's @Plutopia. With John Lebkowski, I'm Scoop Sweeney. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.